Welcome to AI, maintaining academic integrity in the age of artificial intelligence. And again, we are here as part of Academic Integrity Week. We have an hour today to try and discuss all things academic integrity and artificial intelligence, which are both very broad topics. So we're going to do our best to try and get through everything. And we'll just see how we go. So I'm Brendan Robinson. I'm a coordinator of digital literacy at the University Library here. I have previous experience at the State Library of South Australia and particularly supporting public libraries in South Australia, and previously worked in various roles in the public service. My work in the public library space, I guess I'm very used to these webinars and really trying to share information with people. So I hope today that we get some thoughts, provoke some thoughts from you today, and just generate some discussion. So feel free to interact in the chat with each other too, or to me. I will try and get to them. We have Rani here in the background, also from the University Library, who will assist us with that. So just first off, I just want to acknowledge that I'm presenting from Ghana country this morning, and I want to acknowledge their leaders past, present, and particularly those emerging leaders. And I want to extend that to all Indigenous leaders nationally. I'm a very Adelaide local, and sometimes in Adelaide, you can sometimes get on autopilot acknowledging the country you're on because Ghana is such a large area that covers most of metropolitan Adelaide. If you're living regionally, it's probably you're on a different country, so you can feel free to share that in the chat. But I'm also just going to get Rani to share in the chat the map of Indigenous Australia. You may have seen this by now, but I always run into people who might not have seen this. I know I didn't see it myself till very late on, but it just gives a really good visual representation of the Indigenous countries right across Australia. And I really encourage you to explore that as you've got the link. So what will we cover today? We'll do a general overview of artificial intelligence with a particular focus on generative AI, and we'll also explore its links to academic integrity too. We'll explore the potential risks and some ethical challenges of using AI in academic work and why academic integrity is so important when we discuss generative AI particularly. And then we'll also go through some of the AI resources which are available to you through the University Library. So let's start by focusing on artificial intelligence and what it is. Now, a lot of this information is actually pulled from our LibGuide on artificial intelligence, which will also be shared in the chat momentarily. And I'd highly recommend that after this, you go and explore that. You'll see some things that are quite familiar here, but it's a really good all-round resource, which covers a really broad spectrum of artificial intelligence that we won't be able to cover everything today. So I guess when we talk about artificial intelligence in general, it describes the ability for a computer to do something we would normally associate with human intelligence. It's mimicking what we have as our real human intelligence, essentially. You know, we talk and communicate with language, we have reasoning and problem solve daily. We have our own perceptions that are formed through our lived experience and learning. I guess we're also creative, and even if we don't believe we all are, we all think and create things daily without realizing. So artificial intelligence is trying to mimic that. The actual concept of artificial intelligence isn't new. You can find stories about artificially intelligent beings back to ancient histories, and there's different cultures that have different myths and legends that speak of basically an artificially intelligent being. In this example here, this is ancient Greece and Talos and the island of Crete. And I've used AI to generate an image of them there. But it's not just Greek mythologies, it's also Hindu, Chinese, Jewish mythologies, just to name a few. There's lots of stories about artificially intelligent beings. And then we have stories in popular media. Everyone always references things like The Terminator or The Matrix or other Orwellian nightmares and things like that. And they also influence our perception as well. They're often negative too. And it can influence and shape an apprehension towards artificial intelligence. But there are many other reasons, of course. So AI is everywhere. We see it everywhere. It's probably all around you, and you may or may not even realize it. Some applications are more obvious than others. So we'll go through some examples. So content recommendation. your Netflix, what you would like this, your YouTube algorithm, you've watched this, so we think you're going to like this, that type of thing. Social media feeds, a bit similar to your content recommendations. It knows what you're looking at. Sometimes it will pick up on your voice and what you're listening to. So you have that as well. Things like automated factories. So we're talking logistics and warehouse stores, and I guess making processes as efficient as they can be in that logistical space. You also have digital assistants like Siri and Alexa. They're always popping up at the incorrect moments when you don't want Siri, and Siri will say, hello, you know what I mean by that. Online banking security. So they're attempting to prevent fraudulent bank transactions by seeing, I guess, anomalies in transactions. That's AI as well. And even things like email spam filters. Have you checked your junk mail? We've all done that, and it will automatically send some of those more malicious emails off into your junk mail. But often it will send, occasionally something you actually do need to watch will incorrectly be sent there too. Much more too. There's just much more. This, again, we could talk about AI probably all day, but we're just going to really cover the basics for now and what it relates to here. So that was AI more broadly, but we're really going to focus on generative AI because generative AI can create content by learning how to recognize and replicate patterns from large amount of data. It's likely that this area of AI, generative AI, because it's creating that content, it probably has the most links to academic integrity. So I guess from 2017 onwards is when we actually started to have large language models, which are a type of generative AI. We will explore these a little bit more in detail soon. I guess their core purpose is to generate language and text based off of your own input. And it gives you what it believes is a probable correct response based off of its data, the data it has been trained on. Now, that was probably a bit to take in, and I guess this space really moves fast. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're a bit behind in this space. It's always evolving quickly, and it's quite new to most people. So there are many generative AI apps, basically. But when you talk about ChatGPT is probably the most recognizable. When you think about other products, though, it probably just has the brand recognition. So if you think of something like search engines, you think of Google, Yahoo, Bing, all of these places. There's other ones that exist like Brave, and as they offer something more specific. Where it comes to Brave, that's privacy, something a Google wouldn't be able to offer you. There are so many, and there's different reasons we use them, and we have our own preferences on top of that. Going even deeper than that, think about web browsers, think like Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome. They're essentially doing similar things, but they're also a little bit different. And then you have your own preference too. Now, I am not endorsing any of these AIs. It's purely just to be aware that there are many out there, and you might even start seeing some of these advertised in stores or on television, things like that. Either way, AI, generative AI and AI will and already has had a major impact on our world. I guess if anyone's actually used generative AI or is using it, do you want to feel free to share in the comments what it is that you're using and I guess how you're applying it. It's not an endorsement on how to use AI. Pretty much we're talking about today, you'll be guided about how you can use AI within your assessment guidelines. We're going to loop back to that later. But so again, it's not an endorsement on how to use AI, but some ideas on how you might do it. ChatGPT, thank you in the chat there. And was there anything specific that you did with ChatGPT? You might actually see it come through here. So feel free to share how you've actually used it too. So you can maybe use it to brainstorm some ideas, just generating ideas. You might use it to structure your thoughts. You might have some concepts floating around that you want to bring down from the clouds, maybe to help you stop procrastinating. If you can use it to edit your work, if it is in line with your assessment guidelines. And again, we'll loop back to the assessment guidelines after, but that is only if it's in line with your assessment guidelines. I guess you can get some diverse feedback. You can generate some different options of things, very similar to structuring your thoughts. And summarize, synthesize, and analyze. So bringing lots of content together to provide a new output. Again, it needs to be in line with your assessment guidelines, which you'll see a bit later on. So it basically generates a wide variety of content, all based off of your own input and the data it's been trained on. So we call your input a prompt when we're using generative AI. You're basically providing a prompt and you're asking it to do something. And it's responding with some information that it's generated based on that data that it's been trained on. We'll get into some more details, but another way of looking at a prompt is it could be instructions, questions, or context for what you're actually looking for. So Gen AI can be very powerful, but we need to be careful, right? As in, you need to become AI literate when you're using AI. And a lot of that is about critical thinking at this point. Think of it this way. It's someone who is overconfident or bold in their words, someone who is overconfident and biased in their answers and can't always explain their reasoning. It could be someone who's just woken up from surgery a bit vague and they're very confident in what they're saying, but it's not necessarily correct. So your critical thinking is key here. And that's really where we are with AI, being AI literate at this point in time. Okay, so we've spoken about it broadly. Let's actually show you a proper example of what it can do. So I've spoken about using a prompt, and in this case, we're going to use generative AI image creation. So we're going to generate an image here. So I've given it a prompt, which you can see on your screen there, and it will basically attempt to create an image off of this prompt. So I want a happy cat wearing glasses and reading a book in a library. It's just a basic prompt that I'm really using here to show off the power of generative AI. So my prompt goes through the generated AI model that I'm using, and then it provides me an output. And you can see my output there. I have a happy cat wearing glasses and it's reading a book in what appears to be a library. It seems accurate enough on the surface level. I guess you can look into more details there and you might look at the pause and things like that and go, what's going on there? But it's accurate enough. Is it good enough though? So let's go for another prompt, okay? I want to create an image of a university student working hard while maintaining academic integrity, just like those of you here watching today or in the future. So I've used the prompt I've just mentioned and I've used ChatGPT-4 for this one. Input goes into Gen AI, provides me my output. So I guess I want to actually apply some critical thinking skills here. Like, how has it come up with this output? What is it thinking? I mean, the picture looks okay for what I'm looking for. There's probably, the more you look into it, the more things you see. So let's apply some critical thinking and dig into it. So when you create an image, you get a little bit of a report that the Gen AI will often tell you a bit of a description about the picture and what it's done. It will give you a bit of information about how it got to that point that it did. Now, only a really small amount of information. So based off this picture and this output, this is what it's told me. So this is the report it's given me based off that prompt that I had sent. So it's really the bolded words that I think that really trigger it. So it's reflecting focus. And if we look at them in the picture, they look very focused, I guess. Their eyes on the screen, look hard at work. Organization, I'm not too sure about that. It looks like organized chaos. There's a lot going on around that desk. I mean, it's clear but crowded at the same time, and there's lots of books all over the place. So how you think of that, maybe it's looking at the organization in the stacks in the background in the library. It could be that. Dedication. They look quite dedicated to their craft. Even the people in the background look like they're really zoned in as well. But ethical study practices, what has it picked up there? Maybe because they're looking at a computer, but they have various sources of information around them that they can cross-reference and verify. Perhaps that is where they've got to ethical, verifying information, checking for themselves. But in saying that, it's still quite broad. And I guess this is the type of thing that generative AI will do. It will take a bit of guesswork based off the data that it's been trained on and how it relates to your prompt. Let's go into generative AI in the form of large language models. So moving away from image creation now, and we're sort of really looking into the text creation. So I've used ChatGPT again for this one. And I just wanted to do a basic fun story here. I've created a story about a superhero dog, tried to make it rhyme and sound like a news headline in 50 words or less. I've told it how I want the output to appear as a newspaper headline and how long I want it to be. And then we put that into our generative AI. And this is what it comes out with. So its output, it's probably met. I've wanted a story about a superhero dog, making it rhyme, sound like a news headline in 50 words or less. So it's told me, heroic hound saves day in daring display. A fearless dog with a cape so bright leapt through flames in the dead of night. With super speed and strength unmatched, he rescued kids in danger trapped. Possum Pooch, the town's delight. Super dog's here to keep things right. Now that really rhymed. I can verify that. And it sounded really great. It was quite impressive, I actually think. This is created in a matter of seconds. So I guess generating and replicating text and other things like this is where we're really starting to look at crossing into issues with academic integrity. So we'll just continue exploring. So what if I combine the two things that we've been talking about? I use my previous output, the text output there, and I'm going to now ask it to create an image. So my next prompt is now make that into an image. And what has it done? Using ChatGPT, it's given me an output. So let's apply some of that basic critical thinking here. Basic, okay? We're looking at a picture based on a nursery rhyme, essentially. So we're not going to go too deep on this, but look, I can see here it's a super dog. He has a cape on. There are flames. He leaps through flames in the dead of night. It is a nighttime picture, as requested. And there's flames as requested. I guess he's got a cape on to look like Superman, maybe, based off of me saying super dog. So it's linking that to Superman. I didn't request the cape, but hey, that's what AI just does. It does have children in the picture. For my purpose here, this output is acceptable. If your assessment guidelines allow the use of AI, to maintain your academic integrity, you will have to apply similar critical thinking. This is just purely a fun example for this purpose, so it passes. And we will keep delving in towards more academic integrity as we get towards the end of this session. We're going to focus on Gen AI outputs initially. So I guess just coming back to this slide's almost just going to be a grounding for us because I've just shown how powerful it can be, but I want to stress about how we need to be careful. It's very confident in what it knows, and some things can appear correct even when they're not. And I'm going to show you an example of that soon. And we're going to keep delving into AI literacy more as we go. I'm just creating a constant reminder here that while I'm doing this, you must check what's allowed in your courses and your assessment guidelines. It's where your responsibility comes into play. You've got to be responsible for your work, and we will get into the academic integrity and assessment guidelines towards the end. Again, I'm just going to keep coming back to this. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Check your assessment guidelines. Your course coordinator should be able to clearly tell you what AI use is acceptable. So while I'm here talking about that, you need to make sure that it is clarified with your course coordinator first and you understand what level of AI use you're allowed to use. You may not be able to even use AI at all. Show them off. Okay, so we've showed prompts and outputs, and I guess let's cover a little bit about how it does this. I guess at its core, it's really relying off the data that it's being trained on. And what data is this that it's being trained on? So if you think of all of the words on the internet from its inception up until about 2021, when the data set for ChatGPT, just for this one, was put in place, it's basically hoovered up like a vacuum cleaner. It's hoovered up all of the language on the internet up until 2021. So this can include things like Wikipedia, Reddit forums, TikTok transcripts, social media posts, anything really. So essentially, it's hoovered up all these sentences and words that they're made up of, and it's given them a score based off what it believes a sentence should look like based off of that data. This word is likely to follow this word, and then that forms part of this sentence, and then it goes on to paragraphs. It's all probabilistic, based off maths more than words. It understands the basic structure of sentences, and then it has a pattern recognition and almost a probabilistic outcome from it. It doesn't know what it's saying. There is no intention or agency. It is all a probabilistic outcome. And that's why we need to be careful. It looks really good, but when you actually look behind the curtain of it all, it's just guesswork. So how does it do this? I guess we spoke about AI generally, which sits over all of this. It can be many things, and it is essentially trying to replicate human intelligence at this point. Not really, sometimes doing a better job in some areas versus others. So underneath one other type, you have machine learning. So machine learning focuses on algorithms that can learn from and make predictions or decisions based on data. I guess the data that it's fed depends on what the AI model is. So for generative AI, large language models, that is where the words come in that I was talking about, because it's about language. And it often requires human intervention to continue proving its accuracy. So machine learning works best with small data sets, and it's really best on detecting anomalies in a series of data. So if you fed machine learning a pattern of XOXO and asked it to continue that pattern, it would likely identify and continue with the XO pattern. But what if you threw a triangle in there? It would be an anomaly, and it would be something that the machine hasn't been trained on, and it would find it confusing. So thinking about that, machine learning applications will include things like fraud detection, which we spoke about before. So identifying those suspicious transactions, finding those anomalies that I was speaking about. This one looks a little bit outside of their normal practice. CRM, so customer relationship management, and it's good at analyzing customer data and recommending products and things like that based off of purchase history. And advertising, I guess, understanding a buyer behavior based on their interactions on a website. And I guess it can also help more targeted promotions and services. So deep learning is probably the next level for this. And deep learning is a special type of machine learning that uses complex structures called neural networks, which are inspired by how our brains work, human brain works. It doesn't actually work like our brain, though. It's just probably the best way we can relate to it. So deep learning needs large data sets, and it's better for more complex tasks like recognizing faces or voices. It can handle things like images and audio and text without needing extra human input for its outputs. So the machine learning models train faster, while deep learning models take longer and need more powerful computers, which is really an issue of its own that we'll see. So I don't want to cover too much of this in too much detail today, because just due to time constraints, but there is that generative AI masterclass as part of that LibGuide, which we shared earlier. This is just the broad overview. That will delve deeper into it if you are interested in exploring this further. And then underneath all of that, this is where we have generative AI and where that sits. So I guess for large language models, it's enormous text data that we're speaking about. Basically, all of those words on the internet prior to 2021. And again, it could include those social media posts, Wikipedia pages, and Reddit forums, which are things that you probably wouldn't source in your academic work, but that's what is included in these data sets. It can even include content that has been put on the internet in breach of copyright. So you can be breaching multiple, maybe it's Privacy Act or copyright, just because you don't know what the data that has been fed. You don't really have the control over that. And this is why you need to really be thinking critically about its outputs. You start sensing a theme here about critical thinking. So yes, I guess I've already spoke about this a little bit more. It's all the data that has been taken from the web. I guess what's new here is I spoke about it briefly, but how it provides those outputs. It's all a statistical probability of words being related to each other. where they appear most often and where they appear most often together. It's all based off of that data that it's ingested, and then it really gives everything a score, and it's very much so about probability rather than about learning language or being really good with language and writing and things like that. And this is again hammering it home. This is why evaluating the outputs is so crucial, particularly when in academic work. So it's all about statistical probabilities of words being related to each other and in the context that they appear. I guess like a small but relatable way to look at this is we've got text predictions on phones and computers and things like that, where we're writing a message and you put 3 letters up and it will sometimes come up and try and predict the end of the word that you're looking for. Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's so off base it makes you laugh. You just get something ridiculous back. And often it's not the word you're actually looking for. That's like a very, very basic sort of version of what we're talking about. We're talking really broad and complex here, but this is probably just the most practical output. So if we think about it, it receives a prompt, your 3 letters that you put in, and then it tries to guess the word you're thinking of based off of probability. And if you look at, you might say you want to write the word forever. So you write F-O-R, and then it tries to guess. But it's basing F-O-R, it might suggest forthcoming for you, but you're trying to write forever. So you then put an E in and you have F-O-R-E. It might come up and think you're writing forefather. Again, it's just basing it off of a statistical probability. And eventually it will get there right, it will get right, but you still have to guide it. And that's basically what it's doing. It could confuse itself very easily. It's really guesswork is what it's doing. So most Gen AI tools don't understand, I guess, their knowledge or meaning. There is a fantastic paper which we'll share a link to in the chat there. Have a read of it, probably not now, it's a long paper, but keep it for later. It basically covers a wide range of themes on AI and generative AI, particularly large language models. Now, it refers to large language models as being stochastic parrots. What does that mean? I think it's a real fantastic way of showing it. And I've AI generated an image there to tell me what a stochastic parrot is. So you can see that there. I guess when you think of a parrot, the bird that can sometimes mimic like it is talking to you. And the one thing that you often hear people say is, Polly wants a cracker. All right, you might have heard that phrase. I don't know if I'm just getting old, maybe you haven't, but a lot of people do say that, okay? And when Polly says Polly wants a cracker, Polly doesn't actually know what a cracker is, okay? Polly doesn't know that she actually wants a cracker. It's just probably based off of this reward thing. She's probably been in this context before where she said that and then she's been fed a cracker. So the statistical probability for her now is that by saying Polly wants a cracker, she'll be rewarded based on a probabilistic outcome. Doesn't actually know what they're saying. I guess you can see other parrots who are trying to say hello and things like that. Sometimes they look like they're having a conversation with someone. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're doing. They're just mimicking what they've heard. And essentially, Gen AI and LLMs are like that too. It's more about probability and maths than it is about language and English structure. Again, it's all probabilistic, requires your critical thinking. Really trying to hammer home how it's probabilistic and requires your critical thinking. Again, I haven't recommended any specific large language models for you to use. The university currently does not have a position on a preferred LLM. Just being realistic that they are out there though. If you do come across them, be sure to look at the terms and conditions of the AI tool before you jump in and use it. Now, terms and conditions can be long, but I think particularly when it comes to generative AI, it's really important to know what it's doing with your inputs and outputs and all of the other data. So what does it actually tell you in the terms and conditions? What is it doing with its data? Is it remembering your prompts? What is it doing? Are you feeding it private information? Is it protecting your privacy? look into particularly how it manages those inputs and outputs. I guess you have to be aware of your responsibilities too. So you do have to put a bit of time into this. It can be a bit easy just to go ahead and use it because it seems so easy, but it's really dangerous to just go ahead and start using it like that. So there's other things like copyright and privacy laws and intellectual property or client confidentiality, or even a document could be classified a certain way. You don't want to be uploading that into a generative AI. So, okay. So we're going to go into a bit about prompting. So I've discussed prompting at the start there. So what is prompting? I guess it's the thing that you input to receive the output. And I guess the better you are at prompting, the better some of the outcomes you are going to get are. So we'll show you some examples of this. So we covered this very briefly before. It really is an instruction that it's what you're asking the generative AI to do. And Gen AI can't do much without a prompt. It relies on human input. So generative AI in general, it needs a human in the loop, not only evaluating its outputs, but it also needs to be prompted by us to do something. Otherwise, it just sits there as a big data center, essentially. So the more instructions and context that you can give to a large language model, the better your outputs are going to be. So if you go too broad, you'll probably get a really broad answer, right? And it's going to be hard to get through and get to the point of what you actually want to do. We have spoken about it being probabilistic. It's more maths in a sense, but you can't predict the outcome like maths, right? Because it mimics having a conversation with you. It isn't really talking. It's like the parrot that we discussed before. So I'm hoping that picture is really starting to form for you there. Through Gen AI, because of those things, we often start seeing things like unintended behaviors and hallucinations. A lot of the time it's unexplainable because you can't see the working out. And this is where the critical thinking skills are so important. I guess because it can't tell it's working out, sometimes people get a bit wary of it and go, oh my God, is it out of control? No, it's not, because it's more because it's just that parrot that doesn't know what it's saying and it's overconfident in what it's saying. So again, it doesn't do anything without us there. And that's where some people go out of control. No, it just can't explain itself because it's essentially a parrot that is overconfident. Let me show you an example of this, okay? So this is a perfect example of how it's a little bit silly and how you need to be critical thinking. Now, I retried this just today, just this morning, to make sure that this worked again. And encourage you, I mean, you can have a go, just use my prompt, how many R's in strawberry? Now, it did give me a different answer. Unfortunately, it was still the incorrect answer this morning. It said strawberry only had 1 R instead of 2. Now it has 3, for those of you playing at home. So this thing has become, it's called the strawberry test, and I'm sure it's become a little bit of a benchmark just to show how Gen AI outputs aren't really all that, for lack of a better term. I think as generative AIs advance, they'll probably clean this sort of thing up, but it's just good to show you as a point in time. And, you know, you might see this pop up in some other resources as well. So I just like to use it as a good practical example about how AI is strange and then correcting it through good prompting to make it better. So the top right is my prompt there, which you can see here. And I've just asked it, how many R's are in strawberry? And I guess I probably could have asked that question a little bit better, like how many letter R's are there in the word strawberry or something. I get it, something like that. But I don't think it will necessarily change the outcome too much here. And obviously what you can see there is the response it gave me, and then we're continuing on in a thread there. So you can obviously see that it's come back to me saying the word strawberry contains 2 R's. Now, just because it tells me that, is it true? Does anyone agree in the chat? Are there two R's in strawberry? You can feel free to share. But look, I'm not 100% sure myself, right? Because I've just come in. I am sure, but I'm just playing along here, right? So I had to ask it, are you sure? You can see my second prompt there. Are you sure? And ChatGPT is quite sure of itself. Remember, we were talking about that overconfidence and very thinking it's correct in what it is. So I then just want to triple check. So I've just asked, you know, are you positive? I need to be positive here. You'd want to be positive on these sort of things, right? And even with are you sure, it's broken it down to show me that there's one after the T and there's one before the Y, but it's completely missed the second one before the Y there. And then it's really distressing to me about how it's absolutely positive about this, okay? So, and that's just incorrect, right? It's incorrect. So you can see I've now got trust issues. So I've said, how can I trust you? Because I want to know how it can explain itself. But I'm full well knowing that it kind of can't. So if we have a look, continue my thread with it, you know, I I want it to learn. I guess we all learn from people, we all learn from each other. So I guess that's what we're all trying to do here. So I then go, it says it does its own fact checking. So if you look at the screen there, it says it does it by fact checking. You can verify the number of R's in strawberry by counting the letters yourself. It's a straightforward check. It almost feels like it's having a go at me, but like it's wrong. Okay, it is wrong. And so, okay, thanks. But I was here to ask you, ChatGPT. I was here to rely on you. Don't tell me to just, do that. It then says it's got transparency, says it's always open to correction. If it ever makes a mistake, I acknowledge it and adjust it. Has it done that? I don't think so. It's made the mistake 3 times over when I prompted it. So you remember that's where those trust issues come in. And then lastly, it says when needed, I can provide sources or references. It says it can, but can it? What's it going to source or reference to back this up? Not much, because it's incorrect. So this is where you're gonna run into these issues, like and not to trust those outputs and or sources or references it gives you. You have to have your own sources to verify your own information and use your own references and your own work while abiding with those assessment guidelines. So what I've actually done here, just to show you, because I'm really showing off prompting, I've produced a bit of a solution here. Now, if anyone knows a coder or if anyone does any coding, they make fantastic prompters because coding is all about logical sequences. Records managers or researchers are also amazing in this space too. I shared this one in a session. There was a few coders in the chat and they just started running scripts and sending things, and it was quite amazing to watch. Look, some of that technical stuff will start going a bit over my head, maybe yours too. You don't need to know that much level of detail. But I guess what I want you to take out of this is that if you put a little bit more work into your prompts and really break it down, you're probably going to get a better outcome. And lo and behold, look at this example. So I've essentially just asked it to go through and analyze the word strawberry carefully and determine if each letter is an R or not, and then sum all the number of times that you decided something was an R. And look at that. Can anyone see that down the bottom there, the total number? So ChatGPT, it doesn't even act sheepish when it tells you this. It doesn't act embarrassed or anything. It just tells you, yeah, you know what, I'm overconfident. There are 3, even though it's just told me that there was only 2, and this morning it told me there is only 1. So you can see how prompting, having good skills in that sense, can really do that. Now, look, this could be a thing of the past as I guess the data sets get better. And I do think the data will get better. There are new models coming out all the time. And I guess any new or emerging large language model is going to try and ensure that this type of thing doesn't occur anymore. It could just be a moment in time, but it's a great thing to show you the principles behind it. And how Gen AI outputs aren't necessarily reliable. And I'm sure there'll be other examples of the strawberry test in future because there's just some of that unexplainability. So just looking at prompting a bit more. Some people might call it prompt engineering, and it probably indicates there's more of a science behind it. It's not exactly a science or an art, maybe more of an art than a science, because it is a little bit crafty and you need to go and have a play around with it. And, there are some strategies that can help. Some people are a lot better at it than others. I know I've gotten a lot better with it myself over time. And sometimes we can be a bit rushed with our prompting ourselves, but, we can learn some good practices out of it. So I guess what you can do is provide context and specific instructions. So if you do that, it eliminates the need for generative AI to guess as much. So we are talking about a probabilistic tool. If you leave your prompt too short, it will leave it open for too much speculation. It's likely going to hallucinate, basically, because it doesn't know. I guess sometimes in the absence of fact, we ourselves can often speculate too. Gen AI is trying to mimic that, maybe. I guess if you provide some short sentences or be clear in what you want, it will assist you. Try not to be too ambiguous. Review your text as you go, because sometimes we can just write as we talk. Be specific. Don't hit enter straight away. Stop, think about it, and then hit enter and see what comes up. Look at the output you get, and don't be afraid to start again with the prompt and just try and structure it up a little bit better. It really comes down to knowing what you're trying to achieve. So we just spoke about knowing what you want to achieve, but it's not a shortcut to knowing about a topic either. It's only as good as the prompt that you put in. I guess you can have a conversation with Gen AI to refine your ideas, but it can never really replace your human judgment or reasoning. It needs your judgment in there, and you'll get more out of it with more input. I guess you'll learn not to be, you know, if it needs your input, you'll probably learn not to be so reliant on these tools. And I guess you'll excel, though, if you learn to use these tools in compliance with your assessment guidelines, though, if you think of it that way. So when I talk about having a conversation with AI, I suggest starting with generative AI. I suggest starting with a topic you're strong on from your personal life, your favorite artist, movie, location, sports team, whatever it is. Start talking to generative AI about that and assess its output. Suddenly, when you have knowledge on a topic and you feel like you're an authority to speak on something, you'll see how Gen AI can have some of these hallucinations. Now, I recommend that you do that just to see how it works in practice. Because if you do it with something that you're learning and you're not the expert on, it's hard to really verify the outputs. But if you do it on something you're strong on, you'll have a level of understanding. So use it for fun, a topic that you're familiar with. Tell it to create a holiday plan for you, a particular place that you know well. Ask it to create a healthy eating plan for you, and also feed it some data about what you like and what you might eat, and just see what it does. Just see how it comes up. It's the best way to get familiar with it. Using it recreationally in life like that. But of course, you're responsible of what it outputs, and you must be accountable and responsible for that output too. You need to verify things. It's not a copy-paste situation here, particularly in academic work. And this will apply to your working life as well. It's academic integrity for now, but in your working life, it could be adhering to a code of conduct, a policy or a procedure that you must follow. It could be a commercial contract that you must adhere to. So all of these things must be considered when using Gen AI. If you're becoming too reliant on it, that it will impact those areas. So right where we are at this point in time, we need a human in the loop. The human in the loop is where we're at with AI currently. So a lot of people get scared about automation and things taking over our jobs. It may well do so eventually. There are some statistics out there that actually show a 12 million job net gain due to the impact of AI. It could change some roles, definitely. But I also think that AI can free us up to do other things maybe that we like, or other areas to explore in a working context. And I also think with things going more artificial, we as humans will probably crave humanity, connection, and authenticity a little bit more. So maybe things like health and well-being are probably actually going to increase from this. Okay, so again, the main thing that we're saying here is that we also said about hallucinations as well. So you need to consider those inputs and evaluating those outputs. I've explained how it's all probabilistic. I've shown how it can hallucinate, and I've shown how good prompting can lead to better outcomes. And that was all due to my own critical thinking. Remember, you need to check everything with your critical thinking. So we are going to cover some of the ethical challenges of AI soon, but just for now, I'm just reiterating, as part of the data that these AIs have hoovered up from the internet, there is biases in those data. It's basically, and then the outputs it does is based off what it's been fed and taught. So that biased data is giving biased outputs. A lot of it is Western data, and this can often lead to a Western outlook in its outputs, and it struggles with different languages or cultural perspectives too. So just be mindful of that. It's getting better, but this can still cause issues. So AI can plagiarize here. So I guess what we keep coming back to is don't upload personal data, and don't upload data that breaches the Copyright or Privacy Act. You could be feeding the data for the LLM you're using, and that's where it's really important to go through those terms and conditions. I guess for personal data, we have things like the Privacy Act, which dictates what we can and can't do with that. You can't just be sharing people's private information. Even if you think you're not doing anything by doing it alone in your room, like I say, some of those large language models are taking that data and feeding it back into their data set. And all of a sudden you've given someone's personal information out, and you might have breached the Privacy Act there too. And then copyrighted information is a huge one. It's likely ingested a lot of copyrighted information to feed its data set. There are lots of open court cases with companies overseas about this that a lot of people are monitoring for the copyright issue. It is an ethical issue that we discussed there, so we have to think about that. And I guess you can sometimes find it tempting to find a copyrighted report and go, hey, this is how I want something to look, and upload it. You've just breached copyright there, though. So I guess the library has some great resources to assist you better understand copyright if you'd like, but we don't have time to cover it all today, as we're up against it as it is. So I just want to really drill this home that the LLM output is mathematically based. It's a statistical probability on the connection of words. It's probability. It's an average of the data on which it has been trained. It can lack linguistic diversity. And it's sometimes doesn't understand it's very Western in its cultural outlook. Just to hammer home some of the ethical challenges of AI, we spoke about some of them before, but here's a really big one in misinformation. So I guess you can use large language models to generate a story based on whatever you want and post that wherever you want, which is fake news, basically. Just one way of looking at it. And I guess generative AI tools enable the rapid creation of fake news. And it makes it so much easier for malicious content to be created, and so quickly and efficiently. So that AI generated content can mimic those credible sources of information, but it's not adhering to the similar editorial standards or going through other processes. I guess this in turn then influences the public discourse on a range of topics, including politics. It can be very easy to be fooled in the age of news and in the age of AI. You can be fooled by news very easily, particularly if you're a bit older and someone has, the news used to be a trustworthy source for you. It can happen very easily. So ethical challenges, continuing again, you can't, the black box nature, I guess I spoke about how it can't explain its outcomes. How did it produce that outcome? You can't tell because it's all based on probability. You can't explain, and it doesn't show it's working out like maths. It has this black box nature with millions or billions of parameters, which makes it extremely difficult on how to trace back how it arrived at a specific outcome. So Gen AI can also produce, I guess, very convincing but entirely fabricated information, which we just spoke about, and the hallucinations. It can't back its facts up, a bit like the strawberry test. And it can't provide those step-by-step explanations for outputs. And again, that creates that lack of trust between humans and AI. And I guess particularly it influences AI's adoption in fields like health and well-being, well, definitely health, where accuracy matters. Intellectual property and copyright. So we spoke briefly about these ones before. You can yourself have issues if you breach these as well, because they're laws and acts, and don't be uploading textbooks and copyrighted material. Gen AI outputs are, I guess, essentially derivative works based off of its training data. So is it building upon that work, or is it infringing upon that work? Yeah, it's a tight line. Again, it's all informed by the data that it's been fed, which sometimes has already breached copyright. If we look at The impact on creative industries, I guess it can produce that content on scale, and it can potentially pit itself against human creators, and it creates some economic issues and some quality issues. I actually think that from the heart, art from the heart, there you go, will be more prominent and more sought after in the age of AI. And I guess you have liability and responsibility. I guess who bears responsibility for the Gen AI outputs that breach intellectual property or copyright? Is it the user, the AI developers, or the system itself? Again, I mentioned there's lots of court cases around the world trying to sort these issues out. And again, discrimination and bias, the impact on human labour, but I've kind of briefly spoke about these as well. The main one I really want to speak here is the environmental impact. It takes a lot of power to run AI, and they almost run on double the server power than they used previously. Water to keep it cool, power consumption. There's a big impact on the environment, so we need to be mindful of that. Now, we finally get to the end bit where we're just going to close off with linking back to academic integrity now. The library's remit is probably more in the AI space, so that's where I wanted to focus on that, and then we'll link it back in. So not having all that knowledge in our background now, we can look at the academic integrity. So integrity is quite a broad spectrum, and we look at the Cambridge Dictionary definition of it's the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Now, if you don't have context for that, it's a difficult thing to think about. What is honesty? What are strong moral principles? It depends on your context, right? So I guess if we think about it philosophically, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Again, think about this in relation to generative AI. Bit broad, and what is the right thing in a particular context? Does it matter if anyone's watching? I guess if we look at the picture here, in this context, my integrity, is it putting the trolley back in the trolley bay at the supermarket? Is that integrity? It might depend on the context. Might be some different views in the chat on that. But there's no monitor there. But when we talk about academic integrity, we talked about integrity generally. Now let's talk about academic integrity. So it is the moral code of academia, and it involves So you can see on the screen, this is the actual, it's the moral code of academia. It involves using, generating, and communicating information, I guess, in an ethical, honest, and responsible manner. And I believe there'll be a link shared to that in the chat there too, if not already. So I guess we're starting to form a picture of the things that we're really talking about is that students act ethically, with honesty, and responsibly. It's still broad. So on the same link that has been shared there, there are some values that guide the work that we all do at the university. So you can follow along with that link, or you can have a look at later, but it really provides more context for the work that we're all in. So you are a student at the University of Adelaide, so the context for you is academic integrity and what the university values. So let's go through the values and think about these in relation to what we've discussed in generative AI. So honesty. Honesty is about being honest about where your ideas come from. Are they yours? Have you sourced and referenced appropriately? Think about it in relation to the AI. Respect. Have you given credit? Have you referenced other people's ideas? Are you submitting someone else's work as your own? Think about those Gen AI outputs and the probabilistic outcomes and the data it's been trained on. Responsibility. Are you taking ownership of your work? You're not just relying on an AI to do it for you. You're doing it in line with the assessment guidelines that you've been provided. Fairness. Are you treating other students or scholars fairly by, if you were to just rely 100% on generative AI? Not sure. Trust, doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Like I say, you can upload things in your room by yourself, but you just have to be mindful that these are the values for academic integrity. It goes back to the shopping cart argument, only this time you actually do have responsibilities to maintain your academic integrity. We are in that age of online and remote learning, and you'll often be working where people aren't watching, so it's so you really have to be mindful in this space. And courage, standing up where it's right. Step up, and it takes courage to actually step up and say that you don't know something, or even just to acknowledge that it's okay not to know everything. It's the university's job to try and ensure you have a good learning experience, but they don't know what they don't tell. So I know we're getting close to the hour, so we're just probably going to run about 5 minutes over. So you just bear with us. We are hitting to the end. So students' responsibility. So this is taken from the University of Adelaide Academic Integrity Policy, and I've summarised the parts I really want to focus on in bold. So let's just go through, let's get them all up. Okay, you have a responsibility to understand and comply with the university's academic integrity rules and expectations. In the main part here that I've bolded is in accordance with the information and guidance provided by the university and staff. If you're unclear on what you've been guided to do, something you'll have to find out about in your own context. It's okay to ask questions about this. You have to meet any university requirements to undertake academic integrity training. There'll be various reasons why you may or may not have to do that, but if asked, you will have to do that. Now, submit original work. I've bolded original work for assessment. You want to be submitting your own work, right? There's no learning or sense of achievement otherwise. And think of this in relation to generative AI, which we've explored right at the start of this session. Think of those hallucinations, think of statistical probabilities, stochastic parrots, bias, plagiarism, copyright, all of these things. Just consider them when submitting original work. And that will continue on in a working career if that's where you're heading to. It's okay to have strengths and weaknesses on different things. We all bring something different to the table. And I guess understanding your strengths and weaknesses and being aware of them can actually be really helpful in unlocking your full potential. And I don't even like using the word weaknesses. Let's just call it areas for improvement or development. Be kind to yourself. So we also spoke about behaviors earlier on, and that's what we're talking about, honesty and things like that. So how might we be directed to use AI in our assessments? It's important to clarify anything with your course coordinator first. I stress your course coordinator is the one to contact about this. I can't tell you how to do it in each of your contexts, but you may come across some directions like this, like what you see on screen. So no AI, you're not able to use AI in your assessment at all. It's likely that you're being assessed on your ability to write or conceptualize an idea yourself. So it's not about how nice the writing is and it looks and all this, but they want your thoughts. They're kind of trying to pick your brain a little bit. You might have AI assisted editing, able to use editing software in your assessments. It can edit your work, but it can't be used to generate ideas for you. Seek feedback and clarification from your course coordinator if you need that. It's really important. AI-assisted ideas. So AI can be used for brainstorming, assisting to structure your work and thoughts. You can seek feedback on content, but you must cite your AI use, verify its sources. Yes, you have to validate and verify. You're still the human in the loop, okay? And AI-assisted creation and human evaluation. AI can be used to complete certain elements of an assessment task. You will likely reflect on the outputs and show your critical thinking skills, there it is again, and your understanding of the topic. So you will have to have a full understanding of the content and be able to discuss it and reflect on it. So you can't just say AI is going to do it for me. You have to be across it, critical thinking, and be aware. We're really getting to the end here, gang, if you just hang tight. So again, you should always check what is allowed in each of your courses before submitting AI tools. It's hugely important. It's the most important thing I can tell you today. Check what the AI guidelines are for your assessments. If they're not locatable, speak with your course coordinator. You need to be informed about it. And if you're not informed, it might, increase your chances of, even accidentally having an academic integrity breach, and a lack of awareness sometimes can create issues. So try and be informed. Each of your courses will be different. They'll have different assessment guidelines and AI advice, and that's why I can't tell you specifically how to avoid breaching academic integrity. I can't, I've given you some general awareness of AI and some broad strategies you can use and good practices, but just remember each course, assignment, whatever it is, assessment will have different expectations and you must be aware of it. We should all know this. Your course coordinator will be aware of this. And if it's unclear, get it clarified. It's the most important thing. Check the guidelines. It's a joint responsibility. There it is again. Ask that course coordinator. So I guess there's some great resources available in the AI space, and we have a whole range of resources here that will be shared in the chat momentarily. A lot of them, the one that I'm a bit selfish about, maybe I'm a little bit biased, is the library guide, the Artificial Intelligence Library Guide there. There are a whole range of resources available to you through the university. And, I guess one of the most helpful places for you will be the library, the university library. Again, I'm biased, but we do have these resources from you and for you. So we are wrapping up. I'd love if I'm just going to leave this up for about 30 seconds. I would absolutely love to hear some feedback from you. It's because look, we rely on feedback to help inform future sessions. I'm really hoping that you might have enjoyed this session, so that would be something good to hear back from, and whether we look at running something similar again. And be honest about it too. You might even have a chance to suggest some other things too. So I'll leave that up for now. I'm just going to click on because I'm mindful we've just ticked over. So let's loop back. What did we cover today? I did promise a general overview of artificial intelligence with a particular focus on generative AI. We explored the potential risks and some ethical challenges of using AI in academic work and why academic integrity is so important when we discuss artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. And we also explored some of those resources available to you through the university library. So in light of that, I guess I wanted to say thank you for attending the session, and I'm going to leave this open for any questions if you do have any. We'll try and answer what we can today. It is very difficult to give you one broad response for every situation. Like I said, your assessment guidelines and from your course coordinator, they go above any advice that I give you here today. It's all very contextual as to what your field of study is and what your guidelines are and what you've been given. So we can try and answer any questions. So if there's any burning things, let me know and we'll have a look. Not a problem. Sorry, I'm just going through and seeing some of the questions in there. So, all right. And if there isn't any that come through, you do have the email address for the liaison libs in the chat there that you can email us on. I'd really encourage you to do that. So just to wrap up, I just want to say thank you for attending. I hope that your studies go well. And I guess, like I really stress home, hammering home these points all throughout the session, the main takeaway for you is that you're still required to be involved when you're working with AI. You are the human in the loop. You're responsible for your own work and what you're submitting for your work. And I guess you're committing to that. I mentioned before that AI is encroaching in different parts of life, and whether it be to working life eventually, you're probably going to be dealing with similar things. Academic integrity involved in study. You might have to adhere to a code of conduct or a security policy or procedure in a working life. You could have a commercial contract, and it could be patient confidentiality. There's so many things it could be depending on what the field is, but that over-reliance on AI will probably set you up not in a good way. It's good to use it appropriately and within the right guidelines. Just keep remembering that. So without further ado, I think we will end today's session. Thank you all for attending.